welcome to my YouTube channel. Let's chat about you. And this is my 26th podcast, which I'm getting more and more excited as each podcast increases. And I do hope that all the viewers who've been watching are really enjoying these chats with indie authors. And my guest today is a brand new author who's just launched his debut novel at his launch, which he may tell us about later on. And his name is Andrew Mosley. And Andrew, hello, welcome, Andrew.
Hi Beth, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well today. It's very sunny where I am, so I'm very excited about that.
Quite sunny here too. Not too
I'm
bad at all.
glad because you are somewhere around Rotherham in Yorkshire, aren't you?
Yeah, just a couple of miles outside Sheffield. So
All right.
I was
Because
going to say it's not always sunny, but then it probably isn't where you are. So
oh no, it's I always have a vision of Rotherham because I used to have family in Rotherham.
right, okay.
Every time I went there for a holiday, it was cold and it was not sunny. This was in the summer. So
I think that's fair enough. It rains less than it does in near Manchester where I used to live, but it is
oh
cold. Yes.
Oh, good. But I won't be moving to Rotherham because I like in Scotland, where I'm from, actually, it's very sunny. It's amazing. People just don't think it's sunny, but it has been amazingly beautiful weather, great for my gardening.
And
Anyway,
incredible scenery.
yeah, so let's not talk about gardening. Let's chat about you today, which is the whole purpose of this chat. So, Andrew, so as I said, Andrew is a debut novelist and has written a fiction book. Is that correct, Andrew?
It's correct, yes.
Yeah, fiction. And it's called The Choreography of Ghosts. So I love the title, Andrew, and I'd love to chat about the title, which we'll do a little later on. But I really want to ask you some questions because Andrew and I have already been chatting, and he told me a lot about the background to his book, which is really, really helpful for our conversation. One of the things that really came up for me, Andrew, when I was reading through your notes, was about the struggles with confidence and low expectations that you experienced growing up. How did that shape your journey as a journalist and then as a writer?
I think because it shapes my life in general. So anything that I would have pursued, it would have affected. As a child, I liked playing cricket. I liked playing football. I didn't have much confidence in my ability. I didn't pursue it much further. I thought I was not bad at English, but again, I didn't have the confidence to become a writer.
Hmm.
I got to sort of maybe 21 years old, just finished my degree,
Hmm.
thinking, what do I do? And I didn't know. And so I ended up working in a plastics factory for around about 9 months. And then I applied for some jobs in journalism and
Hmm.
I got a job on my local paper, the Craven Herald in Skipton. And I actually got the job because I wasn't as good as the other final applicant. There were two of us in the final interviews and they thought he was overly confident. So it did actually benefit me in a way.
Well, that's interesting that he was overly confident, and you say you struggle with confidence, and yet you
Mm.
got the job. That's a very interesting perspective, which maybe we have to have as a conversation some other time because it's not always about the person who exudes confidence that is better, is it?
No, it's not. And even when I got the job, I took on a training course and they said, if you fail, you won't get the job. So I thought I would fail it. I didn't. I eventually got through. Then I thought, well, I'm going to be the worst writer, the worst journalist they've had. I was for a short period. But one thing I am, I guess, is determined and maybe a little bit stubborn. So if there's something
Yeah.
I really want to do, I will follow it through. It
Hmm.
might take me longer than some people, but I will do it if I really want to do it.
So the whole thing about confidence is there's probably two parts to confidence, isn't there? The determination to succeed. And to me, that requires a certain type of confidence.
Hmm.
It's a quieter confidence. How
Yeah,
do you feel about that?
yeah, completely. I don't think I ever realized that it was that because I would usually start something with, I'm probably not going to do very well at this,
Hmm.
but I would have a go. And then sometimes I think, I did a bit better than I thought. And
Yeah,
that's maybe something I can pursue. But
yeah.
you're right, it would be a quiet confidence. I wouldn't tell people that I was going to do well or there was anything I thought I could be, an ambition, that sort of thing. I keep it to
Yeah,
myself
yeah.
generally because I thought I was setting myself up for failure.
Hmm. And this determination of yours, would you say, just deeply embedded in you, or has it come through your parents as an example? What sort of how did they let's say how did they boost your confidence when you're growing up, or how did they help you? What sort of characteristics your parents have that have helped you?
Yeah, I came from a quite traditional working class family. My dad worked in a cotton mill, a textile mill. Um, his real sort of ambition for the day was to get through the day, have a couple of drinks in the pub, and have enough money to go and play cricket and football at the
Yeah,
weekend
yeah.
and go out. My mum, but he was determined that the family wouldn't be let down, and even when the mills were closing and he had to go on short time, he'd find other ways of making money, and that
Mm.
was his determination, the sort of loyalty to the family
Yeah.
to make sure we were okay. And my mum came from a similar background, but she was quite literary. She liked opera, she liked music, she liked reading, but
Mm.
she came from a family that struggled. Her father ended up in an asylum. She got moved out of home to live with her auntie, who was
Mm.
a deputy head teacher, and she thought, "This is it. I'm going to get taken to London. I'm going to become a different person." Then her auntie died, and she ended back home and been also kind of forced to work in the mills.
Mm.
And so she had to take that and live with that, which she did, and brought up my brother and myself. And I would find that quite difficult to do. And it's only in sort of later years that I've realized the determination that that took and the struggles to have enough money to go on holiday once a year, to go on, weekend break, a day out, that sort of thing. Maybe things I didn't appreciate when I was younger.
Yes. Yeah.
And I might have seen what they had as a lack of ambition because I would have seen that in myself as well, but it wasn't. It's a different kind of ambition.
It's so interesting you talk about that because I was listening on the radio today to an interview with Danny Dyer,
Hmm.
and his father left them when he was 9 years old, is well known. And he said it was his mother who was the real anchor in the family, obviously bringing up three children. And he said about her determination and her hard work that really, and he kind of maybe not like he didn't recognize it at the time, but it definitely transferred to him in the way he has lived his life and the things he wanted to achieve. Yeah.
It did to me, I think. My dad sort of made me maybe not an intellectual person who would just be interested in books. So I did like sport. I did like going to the pub.
Hmm.
Do whereas my mum gave me the other side where I started reading and got into literature and that sort of thing, and
Hmm.
did sort of harbour an ambition to become a writer. And I think I brought my character into the main character of my book as well. In one of the early drafts, which there were 11, um, my brother asked my mum, my brother's not a big reader, and he asked my mum what the book was about. And she said it's about Andrew. And I thought, that wasn't the intention. And
Okay.
so it must be mightily dull. So I thought I better rewrite it. And Michael Morrison, the character in the book, he's quite a determined character, although he does
Yeah.
experience the lows as well. And I
But
can identify with that.
yeah. But there was something that we discussed about your father when you became a journalist. What did
Mm.
he say to you?
He said he didn't believe that I could do jobs such as, say, there'd been a tragic death of maybe a young person and you had to go round to the family because it's before internet, you couldn't connect with
Hmm.
people on social media. So you'd have to go round, park outside their house, knock on their door,
Hmm.
tell whoever answered the door that you're from the newspaper and you'd
Hmm.
like to have a chat about whoever had died and put a tribute in the paper and maybe get a photograph. And he said, I can't believe you can do that. You can't even take a beer back to the bar when they give you the wrong one. So he didn't think I would make it. And that was kind of the first real positive words he gave me, even though it was kind of a double negative.
Hmm.
Um, I think he was quite impressed that I'd been able to do it, and I'd got that, but I knew I had to do it when I got the job. So it was a
Yeah.
bit of those things. Well, I have to do it, so I'll do it.
Yeah. And isn't that something with a lot of people as well? They don't appear to be able to do something, but there's a certain need that they have, like in your journalism, like your dad said, I didn't think you could do it, but you could. So it's
Mm.
almost like you're two characters in a way.
It is interviewing famous people and learning to interview people from different backgrounds. So you might go out to a certain type of house in a non-salubrious area, and there might be 8 people sitting there, and you think, right, I've got to be on their level, or you might be with some top level politician or
Mm.
business person who's clearly been to a public school, speaks a bit better than maybe, or a bit differently than maybe someone from Yorkshire does.
Yeah.
And you manage to interact and you come away and think, oh, I did that. I did okay there. I did get onto their wavelength, or they came to mine. We met somewhere in the
Mm.
middle.
Yeah. So have you always been in journalism, or have you had a break and gone away and come back to it again?
And not very long break. I did have a break, so mid 90s. I got made redundant, but it was for about 18 months. And then I
Mm.
went back into journalism. So I've done like sort of normal general reporting, been a health reporter, a music reporter.
Mm.
And then I became a features editor, which was interesting, and then a
Yeah.
tech editor, and then eventually an editor.
Okay. So are you currently an editor of your newspaper?
Left at the end of last year. We
Okay.
got taken over by a national group, as a lot of newspapers have,
Mm.
and it just wasn't the same. They didn't want people there really. They wanted it to go online only
Mm.
to save money, and it was all about the shareholders. Whereas the paper before last year had been independent since 1858. We could make our own decisions, our own policies, and it was interesting. And
Yeah.
it lost the magic to me, and I
Yeah.
realized it wasn't going to come back.
Yeah. It's something also that when we were talking about, I suppose this happens with many writers when you are writing, you write it, you read it, you edit it, you self-edit it, you tear it up, you throw it into, I've often seen movies of guys sitting on the typer,
Yeah.
paper in the bin, great
The
big
bin.
stack of papers, all rolled up, scrunched up.
You
And
always manage to throw it into the bin as well. It never
yeah,
misses.
it's pretty consistent, big part mountain. But it's something that you said that you went through about 11 drafts until you were happy with
Mm.
what you felt you would like to press the button on. So, what lessons did you learn from rewriting and restructuring your novel through 11 drafts?
I learned to plan the novel better, which is something I didn't do. I just started writing it on holiday one day, just outside Sorrento, sitting by a pool, and I'm thinking, people are reading autobiographies of celebrities who they're probably not even autobiographies,
Hmm.
and I'm thinking I could do something better than this. I could write a book that people could read on holiday that's not, too highbrow,
Hmm.
but it's interesting. But I did write that book eventually, but the dialogue was not in there. It was poor. The characters weren't developed enough, and I hadn't planned it. And I did a couple of writing courses
Yeah.
and went back to the beginning and started planning it scene by scene. And I had 30 chapters originally, of
Hmm.
which 14 were set in England and 16 in Italy. And
Hmm.
I ended up with 20 chapters, of which 19 are in Italy and one in England. So, and moving the chapters about and having to restructure it and do the timelines again. So it was quite a extended process, certainly longer than it needed to be.
Yeah. Do you know, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I started my second novel and I'd written 44,000 words and I
Yes.
went to my editor, who used to be my creative writing teacher. She's also an editor. And she did oh my God, it was what she calls tough love. And she basically said, write it again. This is not going to be a readable book by a general public if that's what you're wanting. You've got to literally restructure it in exactly the same way. So
Yeah,
it's something that it's a process, isn't it, really?
it is, but it's easy to get carried away, isn't it? And
Yes.
if you think what you're writing as well is well written, which there's nothing to suggest it's not, and you think it's interesting, but you've not really got a structure, and that's what I missed. I think I missed the
Yeah.
structure, the character development, and certainly the dialogue, which was something I should have been good at, having been a journalist for years, because you listen to how people speak and the rhythms of how they speak and how it shapes their character, or how their character shapes
Yes.
how they speak.
But I guess people ask this question quite a lot. How different is writing as a journalist to writing as an author?
Yeah, some people might say it's the same, writing fiction as journalism, but when you're a local reporter, what you write is generally 100% true. There's no elaboration, there's
Hmm.
no exaggeration. You write because you've got a local audience that you have
Hmm.
to you have to keep, so you can't anger people living in your area too much. The difference is you're writing 300 word stories, and yeah, you might write 300 words of quotes out or 300 words of just sort of general prose background.
Hmm.
You might have to reorder it, but you've got 80,000 to do, and that's a
Yes.
big. It's a big reordering, and it's a big
Yes.
difference in the timeline. And you've got to develop the characters more. Whereas in a 300 word story, you perhaps don't. The
Yeah.
reader can literally make up their own mind whether they like the
Mm.
politician, the person that's complaining
Yeah.
about them.
Because I guess it is a story of an event that's taking place almost straight away. So
Yes.
you don't
Yes.
have to put too much poeticness into it. It's just you're giving facts and writing it in the most interesting way. It's going to capture the reader, and of course, that is what sells newspapers. Yeah, whether online or physical newspapers. So
One of the first
therefore,
things I learned as a journalist, I wrote an intro and it was 46 words long. And I thought it was great. It was really flowery. And I thought, it's really good that. And they just took a red pen and went through it and said, why have you I thought, well, it's nicely written. So it's not the point. You've got to get the facts in there in as the least amount of words as you possibly can. And
yeah.
I always remember that. Mm.
But that's interesting also because in writing, so I write memoir, you're writing fiction.
Mm.
What my editor says, what's really important is you showing, not telling. So the difference I would perceive in journalism is you're telling,
Mm-hmm.
whereas in novel writing, you are showing
Yeah.
because you want people to really let their imaginations really flower, yeah, and really grow with the story. You don't want to tell them too much, but you want to just encourage them to start also breathing the story into themselves.
Yes, you do. And I think that's again something I didn't realize that I was learning when I was rewriting it. And that phrase kept coming up, show not tell. And
Yes,
I'm not sure I even really understood that I was developing that as I rewrote. And I think I did tell in that first version because it was
yes.
lacking in dialogue and lacking in maybe background. And it was a bit, I'd say, not abrupt, not the right word, but a bit straight to the point. I was perhaps
Mhm.
giving too much away too quickly,
Yeah,
too easily.
yeah.
And that was something I learned.
I think I read a small piece by F. Scott Fitzgerald in The Great Gatsby when he was describing the waiters carrying trays of champagne in the afternoon party. And the way he talked about the waiters is almost like there were cranes. There's
Ah,
beautiful birds on cranes elegantly walking through and across the grass and carrying these trays. But the way he described it, I thought, oh my God, that is such a way that I can actually see these guys floating across. And so that to me was about the showing. You really get into the whole story, don't you? You really capture the moment in time. And I suppose that's what is wonderful about writing. Maybe that's what you've discovered also in writing as an author as opposed to a journalist, how you can get so involved in the story and express it for your reader.
yes, I wish I'd written that line though. And it's, yeah, definitely is. I think you try to read as a reader when you're reading your own work back as well. You've got to
Mm.
transport yourself into the person at the other end. And sometimes I was reading, one person told me on about draft eight that it was far too introspective, and it is introspective, and that was slightly deliberate. But I did realize that it was too introspective, and
Mm.
I took a lot of that out and developed some of the introspection into something else.
Mm.
I could find I could use it, but I'd probably over elaborated some of the thought processes.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So I want to just talk about something else, a very important theme about learning to let go that you mentioned in your book.
hmm.
In fact, I had it written down over here. I just earmarked it. Yeah, I think it's ultimately about learning to let go and to stop seeking something better that maybe doesn't exist. How does does that reflection come into your own life's experiences?
Yeah, I think it does. Yes. As a child, I sort of struggled with mental health a little bit, and I couldn't see beyond even leaving primary school how I could not be in that place, and then how I could not be in school, and how I could live afterwards. And I struggled quite badly with that. Um, and I look back on that now, and that comes to sort of life, love, whatever job you've got. wherever you live sometimes.
Mm.
Um, I found that rather difficult, and maybe in my 20s when I left Yorkshire and moved down to Devon, that was the first time I properly let go of something that had anchored me or where I'd anchored myself.
Mm.
I probably didn't know I'd learned that lesson at the time, and that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And it still took me a long time, and same with relationships, all of that sort of thing. And I think
Mm.
writing the book and the character that I had, he becomes a famous novelist or semi-successful novelist. Then that goes with his second book, and that sends him into a sort of spiral of depression, really.
Mm.
And I think you're conditioned to always think things will always stay the same. You know, you get
Yeah.
married or whatever, or you move to a place, think this is great, you get a nice job. Yeah, this will do me. And then suddenly something changes.
Mm.
Someone leaves, someone dies, someone sells the company, and your life changes. And you don't foresee these things. And maybe that's a good thing in
Mm.
some ways, and maybe it's not. And I think it is about learning to let go. And I had to learn to let go with the book
Yeah.
in the end, really,
Yeah. So
because
which aspect, when you say you had to learn to let go with the book, what element or part of it are you referring to?
I think Michael Morrison as a character had to learn to let go of his relationship, his life in England, and what had always kept him there.
Mm.
Me as a writer, I had to realize um, it was the best it was going to be. I think. Well, I could have made it better, but then I wouldn't have let it go.
Yeah.
I could have had five more goes at it. When is it finished? When is it perfect? Could it be better?
Yeah.
And I think that must be the same with musicians. You're recording a song or an album,
Mm.
and you persistently walking around, consistently walking around. You've got an idea. You think,
Yeah.
oh, that sentence could be better,
Yeah.
and it's not. Or you have to reach a point where you say that'll be it, but you probably never know, and maybe you shouldn't. I'm
Yeah.
reading something at the moment called The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa.
Mm.
It's a book he wrote throughout his entire life under two different names, neither of which were his. And he never intended it to be finished or to be published. He's obviously quite wealthy, back about 200 years ago in
Yeah.
Portugal. And he just went to a cafe most days, observed people, and wrote down his thoughts on life. And he never completed it. And he said it, and he says quite early on, this will never be a completed piece of work. And I
Mm.
thought that was quite interesting. But I think as writing a novel, you do have to learn to let go, and you do have to say, right, I need to do it now. Otherwise, I'll never write another one, and I'll never
Yeah.
move on.
And more than anything else, if you keep on trying to get a perfect book, you're never going to publish it either. That's it.
No, you're never going to write a second one, are you? Because you're going to keep going back and thinking,
Yeah.
yeah, write
Yeah.
that one. And
Yeah.
it's easy to do. You get obsessed with. My partner, she read it. Oh, probably every draft, and I kept saying, "Can you just read it for corrections?" And she was saying, "No, I think you could develop this and you could develop that." And I was like,
Oh
"Well,
no.
yeah." And then I'd start doing that, and then I think, "Oh, actually, this could happen and that could happen," and
Yeah.
it'd all start again. Right, that's another couple of months delayed.
I want to uh, introduce the listener to the title of your story, which for me is very powerful, The Choreography of Ghosts. Uh, what inspired the title, and how does it reflect the deeper themes of the book? Is it, does it symbolize past influences that you've had, or lost connections, or the way memories shape our lives? What is it about the title that conjured up for you to reflect the story that you've written, or even your own life?
Mm. I didn't start with a title. I didn't have one in mind, and I was writing bits about a scene that I'd witnessed or jotted down notes in Italy, where I'd seen the shadows coming off the walls of a square and down an
Ah,
alleyway near
yeah.
where I was sitting. And I thought, oh, they look like shadows dancing up and down the walls. And then I thought about the people who built that square and the people who'd influenced that area. And now you wouldn't be there if they hadn't been there. And so the shadows reminded me of ghosts. And I thought these ghosts are part of the past, choreograph your life, and they shape your future. You know, they don't have to have even died. They can have left. It can be an ex-partner. It can be somebody you've just lost touch with. But everyone you meet or everywhere you go, someone from the past has a bit of influence on your life. And I think that happens to Michael, where the people who died in his from his recent past a choreograph in his existence. They've moved him from England to Italy, and he's got this new life. And I think it's quite an interesting concept. And the
Yeah.
title just came to me when I was writing a sentence, and
Hmm.
I thought, "Ah, that's not bad," and I wrote it down. And then somebody told me it made no sense, and they said I'd used an old Hollywood trick of apparently putting four words that were disconnected together that sounded good, and I thought that was a bit unfair. I hadn't. I didn't even know the trick. And
Yeah,
um,
I
somebody else
did.
said they'd expected a ghost story, which
Hmm.
is fair enough. Um, I never said it was a ghost story, but I'd
Hmm.
say in a way you could say it is, but maybe not in the traditional sense. There
Yes,
are ghosts
because
that are recently dead, inhabiting your current life.
yeah, I think something I've learned about a title is how a title can really mislead your reading
Mm.
audience, and how somebody who how they may not even pick it up because they think it's a genre that they're not really interested in. But that's in fact that's why in marketing we have to do these kind of book readings and explain to people, because when I read that title, I immediately was captured. The choreography was for me is but dance steps.
Mm. Yes.
That's going to be a dance. It's going to be flowing, floating, purposeful, specific, and then off the ghosts. And then I imagined all these ghosts dancing. And I
Yeah.
hadn't read your book at the time.
There's a
And,
scene in
and
there
I,
where that sort of happens.
yes, so it's about ghosts dancing in our lives, people dancing and playing. And I remember there's an American woman, she was a theologian, called Carolyn Miss, and talked about how even before we're born, we meet people. And at the moment of our birth, we get put into the into this river of forgetting memories. And then when we are born and we begin to grow up and live our lives, we meet people. It could be a newspaper vendor on a corner who you'll have a chat with. And he may not have anything more to do with your life, but he's touched your life. Or it could be the lady that you're helping with her groceries. The bag is too heavy, as an example. And that's what this can remind me of. It's the touching, like little touchstones in our lives, people we meet.
You
And
remember it, don't
it really
you?
fascinated me, your title.
And they can be by chance, can't they? You
Yes,
make a decision to turn left or right, and that can
yes,
change. It can just be a small thing, or it could change your life. You don't know who you're going to meet.
yes,
And
yeah,
there is a scene in which they're at the party at the mansion house, and they're all dancing, and there are the reflections. They're all in the mirrors, and they're all in their finery, apart from Michael, who's just on the sidelines watching.
yeah.
And they're at that time shaping each other's lives and shaping his.
Yeah, I think I'd like to in fact almost see you write a second novel developing that whole theme, because I think it's very powerful, that thing about people who come into our lives, and when we let go of them, we have to let go of them. Can we ever let go of them? Their ghost is always going to be in our lives, forever flirting around the edges of our lives, you know. And sometimes we find it impossible to let it go, but we have to. And do we become a ghost ourselves, I wonder?
Yeah, to them, I wonder that sometimes. If you Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Plymouth, and I hadn't been there for some time. And in my late 20s, my ex-partner, she lived on this street we were walking down, and on the Barbican in Plymouth.
Mm.
And I sort of looked up and thought, gosh, she used to live in that flat there. And I thought about her quite a bit since then. And I thought, I wonder if she ever even thinks about me or remembers. And it's funny how just that certain, you can look
Yes,
at a room and think, we've become ghosts in that room. No
yeah,
one will ever know we were there. Uh,
yeah. It's a wonderful, it's really a wonderful image. Yeah, I'm really loving this conversation. It's wonderful. Really, thank you. I wanted to ask you about something a bit more practical that listeners really like to understand about the marketing of our books.
hmm.
I'm intrigued because you're in publishing, yeah? So I imagine that would be much easier for you to find publishers to publish your book. But I know that you're a self-published author. So what challenges have you been facing in publishing your book? And how did you overcome them?
I think some of them were my own because it took me so long to write it. And
Hmm.
because I went through so many changes that in the end I was looking at sending it to publishers and that sort of thing and thinking, well, how long is this actually going to then take? Are they
Hmm.
then going to come back and say you need to rewrite it again? Yes, they
Hmm.
are, which is fair enough. And I got to a stage of thinking I need to get this out actually, and I was a lot clueless as to actually how to get a book out really,
Hmm.
to approach somebody, to even get the code, to register with Amazon, and that's not really my thing. I find that a bit
Hmm.
dull, whereas some people find it really interesting and they're
Yeah.
good at it.
Yeah.
And I did make this decision, even though on a marketing course I did with Michael Heppel, I said I wanted to be properly published, as I called it at the time.
Hmm.
I probably didn't need to. And I contacted Matt Bird, who
Yes.
has done a lot of people's books, and he was absolutely brilliant. And
Yeah.
it went through. I don't think I'd have even done it. I don't think I'd have had the patience
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have gone through the technicalities and to get the book out, and then for it to actually arrive, in a few boxes at your doorstep. And you think, I wouldn't have done that. I'd have written it, and it would have just been sitting there. And some people are good at that sort of thing, and I would
Yeah.
be better next time because I've gone through
Yes.
it with Matt.
Yeah.
Although I'd probably still,
I,
still ask him to do it.
I have to say, and I hope that Matt is going to watch this video, that Matt is quite extraordinary in
Mm,
giving of his time way beyond what he should do in helping us in indie authors. He himself was an indie author and published. I didn't know he'd written his book, but I actually love his genre.
yeah,
I'm spoiled.
great.
I know,
Yeah,
yeah, and yes, he really. I've forgotten what the word is when he does all the copy. Mm, what's it called?
formatting or the
Yeah, he puts the whole book together, and
yeah,
then he goes beyond just doing that. He actually helped me to upload it onto Amazon. So
stunning.
I'm just going to say a little quick thank you, Matt, for helping us all.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Really appreciate what you've been doing for us.
Really.
Without you, we'd still be sitting on our bums with our books, not
We worked
published.
with a pile of papers.
Pile of papers, absolutely. Um, this as we draw to a close, Andrew, there's a question I want to ask you. Um, Let me just think. Is there a sentence or a paragraph in your story that you would say is your, let me see, specific breakthrough as an author?
I'd say there were. I'm going to over egg the answer here and say there were three bits, because originally the first chapter was oddly about the killing of a moth, and that's how much the book has changed. And then I wove quite a lot, well, 15 chapters or so into one, and made it about this walk around Bradford where the character realizes he has to change his life, and that that realization that I needed to do that, to condense that, and to not make it about me maybe wishing I had this different life where I was in Italy was
Hmm.
a breakthrough. A few of the parts in Italy, where I went back a second time to do the research, and I walked around with a notebook and went around cafes and bars. That felt like a breakthrough.
Hmm.
And it was a bit on holiday. Sounds like I'm always on holiday. I'm not in Greece. I'm sitting on a balcony, and there was a storm, and I was looking out, and I said, "What's that? What do you think that is up there?" And there was this huge mansion house that was lit up overlooking the harbour.
Hmm.
I walked up the next day, and it was derelict, and it got barbed wire around it, and you could walk over the barbed wire as other people had done. So I did that and went in, and it was quite scary. There were
Hmm.
obviously spotters in there, and there were birds flying about, and that's kind of when I had the idea that changed the story. It was, as I called it, the light bulb moment, really, that
Hmm.
brought into play Mariana's family and why she affected Michael Morrison's life so much. And then, as we've talked about, the end, where I realized that maybe Michael Morrison could make a comeback as a writer, which he'd said he'd never do because he'd fallen out of love with life and words,
Hmm.
could write Mariana's story. And that's the bit about learning to let go. Is it the beginning? Is it the
Yeah.
end? Do
Yeah.
we even know? And does that even matter?
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that. If you had to create what you've just said in one sentence, how would that sound?
That would sound like a long sentence with lots of commas in it, which I think some of mine did have in the original. Um, I'd say it was the moment I realised that the novel is about learning to let go. It
Okay.
is that maybe there isn't a specific end.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew. I have really enjoyed this chat with
And
you.
thank you for
Yeah.
having me on your YouTube channel. It's absolutely
My
fantastic.
pleasure. I want to end with something that you wrote, which I think is really sends almost a shiver through me, and I hope it would send a shiver through the readers when they get to read this book. This is the end. It's on page 250, in fact. The end. Or was it? Maybe it was only the beginning. Whatever the answer, there would always be a new story to tell. The writer was certain of that. Which brings me to, are we going to be seeing another book on the bookshelves soon? Oh, in a year, maybe?
I've started two others, or I've got two other ideas down. One I've got quite far into actually properly planning because I had almost gone down the same route as before by starting to write the book without planning it properly.
Mm.
It's a completely different book, and it's set in Yorkshire, and it's set right back in starts in 1977 on Silver Jubilee Day, and then comes back to 2025,
Okay.
where the two main characters are in different care homes, reflecting on events that day and what happened
Hmm.
up and more in a quarry from where someone died
Okay.
48 years ago. But at my book launch, one person said, I'm really looking forward to reading the follow up. And they actually said the patron saints of lost causes or Walks Through Weeping Cities, which were Michael Morrison, my character's two books. And I hadn't had that idea. And I thought, oh, yeah, I could maybe write a follow up. I think you maybe said a prequel or a sequel.
Hmm.
Um, because I have got quite into that character, and I can see now how people who write say TV series they end
Yes.
up writing more and more on the same character because you do
Yes.
inhabit their head and
Yeah.
you become them as much as they become you, if that's the right way of saying it.
Yeah. I
I
understand.
feel that when my mum said that the book was about me, I think in the end I became more about Michael Morrison because I thought about him so much and what had happened to him and
Yeah.
how we
Yes,
should react.
I remember a friend of mine, Philip Kerr, who wrote, I'd say, sort of detective stories. He had one main character that lasted for so many, many books. He became very, very famous for that.
All right.
So, yes, you can take one character and whole series of them.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Always.
I do like that idea. You see it often, don't you? And like
Mm.
it's Anne Cleeves who writes Shetland and Vera, and those characters are really strong. And
Yes.
you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
understand how they probably intended to write one book and then thought, now write three, and then it becomes 20. And
Wow. I look forward to that. Will I live long enough, I wonder?
well, I don't think I will. Might get a second one.
Andrew, thank you so much. Where can listeners and readers find your books?
Yeah, it's obviously available on Amazon. It's available at waterstones.com. If you fancy a trip to the Yorkshire Dales, it's in the lovely village of Grassington at the Stripy Badger Bookshop
Yeah.
and Cafe, and it's on in the Makers Emporium, which is a great art shop full of local creatives, work of
Mm.
local creatives on Rotherham High Street.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And just a very, very quick reminder that this channel is specifically to promote indie authors with their new work and for them to also have a chance to talk about themselves and to give us other would-be writers hints and tips on what it is and how it's going to be to tell our stories.
Or what not to do, maybe in my case
I'm not to
sometimes.
do as well. Thank you, Andrew Mosley. Thank you for being part
No,
of
thank you, Beth.
Let's Chat About You, and goodbye for now.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.